Prey, not to be confused with the 2017 incarnation that has no relation to the original, as well as the 2022 Predator-based film involving a lone Native American trying to fight an alien menace, Prey 2006, is a game about a lone Native American fighting an alien menace. Originally a title that was being developed since the advent of the millennials, Prey went through some serious development hell, where it almost saw its release sometime in the mid-90s, but failed to meet it due to major technical problems. Fast forward years later, with the IP now being handled by Human Head Studios and back publishing by 2K, Prey was seemingly back on track and eventually got its release in 2006. As a game, Prey blended an interesting mix of old-fashioned 90s FPS, where protagonist Tommy can wield a bunch of crazy-ass gross-looking alien weapons to shoot at a bunch of crazy-ass gross-looking aliens, while also navigating a very mind-bending environment that could make both you and Tommy puke your guts out. A sci-fi romp that, while some didn't really consider to be a perfect FPS package, it was a beloved one with giving you a trippy space adventure to raise hell on a bunch of aliens. I loved it back in the day, and I remember it fondly with how it really pushed the id Tech Engine 4, using what made Doom 3 look so darkly beautiful, and making Prey look grossly beautiful. From the mind-bending environments to the fleshy weapons, Prey brought a very atmospheric game that made you feel its sci-fi vibe. Although it wasn't something that was considered revolutionary, it was beloved by many. But with 20 years passing us by, the game slowly fading into obscurity, never getting its sequel, and only rebooted in name alone, does the original Prey actually hold up today?
Nisi! I'm ready now!
Prey takes place in the fictional universe of real-world Earth, where we play as Damasi Tawodi, or Tommy by his English nickname. A man who has grown weary of his heritage, he hopes to elope with his girlfriend Jen and leave the Native American reservation in order to find a new lease on life. While trying to wrap up the night at Jen's bar by talking to his grandfather and refusing to acknowledge his culture, hitting the casino arcade, cycling through a jukebox for a few rock or alternative tracks, and beating the crap out of some drunks who think they can John Smith Jen from her native bar, the aliens have come to collect.
Grandfather!
Brought aboard a spaceship that seemingly wants to harvest humans, Tommy is hoisted away for processing, but not before rolling the lottery on being freed by a few rebels. With only his wits about him and deciding whether to free some people from their mortal coil,
You're better off this way.
it's up to him to make his way through the bowels of this large alien ship and find a way to bring his grandfather and Jen back to Earth. A pretty straightforward story of alien abduction and heroism where Tommy just happens to be the right man for the job thanks to his military training and being the guy with the chosen wrench. Prey's story is a familiar one for most sci-fi fans that have seen movies like War of the Worlds, where there's some horror involved with the way they treat humans, and Prey largely borrows from the same book. But as far as the setting and plot goes, it's a good fit for the action space romp that Prey wants to convey, especially because it's not trying to overstay its welcome. A 6 to 8 hour campaign, which might be on the shorter side for most people, but it's an appropriate length for the adventure that Tommy undertakes, trying to reach his grandfather and Jen, finding out that things aren't going as planned, learning more information about the giant ship known as the Sphere, and uncovering the implications behind why it exists in the first place. Blockbuster action that can be completed in 2 to 4 sessions, depending on how gung-ho you are. And there's definitely more action than story going on. While it's more complementary as a means to make the game feel more like a complete package when combined with the gameplay and the presentation, there were some story parts that I did like. A few include the game's shocking moments and some of its themes. Spoiler territory, so beware if you care. But for the first 20 minutes of the game, having your grandfather offed was and still is a pretty shocking first impression.
Oh my god, no! No!
Although the game reassures the player that Inisi is an active character in the plot, Due to Tommy's ability to tap into the spirit world thanks to his ancient Cherokee powers, it's still a pretty gut-wrenching scene, especially with the alien's means of harvesting. Another occurs with Jen, where even though it looks like we managed to reach her in time, it's pretty gross and shocking to see what happens to her as well. Also, there's an interesting plot point where the sphere is actually responsible for giving life to various planets, including Earth, and periodically return to harvest its citizens to maintain its life. A bit of an ancient alien cliche plot for certain sci-fi stories, but I thought it was a fun fit for Prey. I'm also kind of a sap for elderly teachers and themes of getting in touch with your roots, which I was a bit fond of with Tommy and his Cherokee heritage. It's not that deep by any means, and I'm sure it comes off as a bit cliche, but it at least gives Tommy some character development rather than just being a one-note action hero. Him reconciling with the people he cares about and living to see the next day, it's at least fair to say that he now accepts the heritage he comes from, especially when he rebuilds the bar from the ground up. So, a story that isn't really deep, but a nice fun complement to an otherwise action-heavy game, and you can't really ask for anything more.
Alright, this'll rock some shit.
Guns, and gross-ass guns are the key gameplay elements that comprise what you'll be doing a lot in Prey. Rooted in 90s style shooters, where you get a variety of weapons that your older FPS protagonists would be proud of, Tommy gets to use a full arsenal to blast any alien that gets between him and his family. You start off with the basics, then slowly build your arsenal, ranging from the simple assault rifle all the way to a rocket launcher. The fun bits about these guns are the alternate modes they have, such as the hunter rifle becoming a sniper rifle, or the autocannon doubling as a grenade launcher. Basically 2 weapons in one. In terms of just the shooting alone and general run and gun gameplay, it's pretty basic. The enemies in Prey are just moving targets that shoot back at you, and you'll usually be taking cover while shooting back, or shooting them first as fast as you can when you're out in the open to minimize damage. Some weapons are needed for certain situations like enemy proximity or sturdiness, so a level of competence is needed when swapping to the proper weapon. Pretty simple, and I didn't really feel that challenged or having to sweat it out in the firefights. And that is what best describes the gunplay. Simple. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a bad thing. While it's not making me sweat on the same level as something like the new Dooms or Ultra Kill, it kind of feels oddly relaxing. Like a head-empty shooter where I just have to worry about clicking my targets rather than micromanaging my weapons. Of course, everyone's different with how easy or difficult they want their games to be, and I occasionally want to sweat it out in my FPS games, but I also enjoyed how relaxing it was just to shoot a bunch of aliens without a single thought in my empty cranium. Although a particular weapon that I thought was really cool was the leech gun, where it functions differently depending on the nodes available in the environment. It can become this plasma-spewing auto-firing gun, a close-range cryo-freezer,
Yo, what's up?
a lightning gun that makes me feel like Zeus, and a literal sunbeam laser gun that's the closest thing to an FPS Goku. The second layer of gameplay are the puzzles, but like the shooting, they are also relatively simple to perform. You'll usually just be pressing buttons to open up pathways, scaling anti-gravity platforms, as well as using your spirit form to traverse barriers. More on that gimmick in a sec. A lot of them are very cool when you look at them visually, but they lack a lot of complexity that would have made them more brain-teasing. Again, simple for those who might like it, but my personal preference for anything puzzle-related wanted something a little more complex. The other interesting gameplay mechanic is Tommy's ability to tap into the spiritual realm, where he can project his astral form that can shoot hard-hitting arrows, as well as bypass barriers that his physical form can't traverse. You can also interact with consoles in this form, but oddly enough can't use the anti-gravity walkways or open doorways. It's a cool mechanic when it comes to the barrier-based puzzles, or having to use your spirit form to press a button so your physical body can move forward. When used for combat, it has the benefit of using its own ammo and can one-shot unsuspecting enemies. It can also be used for scouting in some areas, plus having the benefit of avoiding lasers, which I only realized I could do by the end of the game. Every other situation, I just unka-bunged it. So it's a cool mechanic that's meant to be a unique thing for Prey, but it doesn't feel as fully utilized as it could have been. This goes back to how simple the puzzles are, and using the spirit form doesn't require that much thinking either. What also makes the game not so pressure-inducing is how you can't actually die. When your health is reduced to 0, you travel to the spirit realm where you shoot a bunch of evil red and blue spirits while Tommy's body slowly regenerates. You basically go back to where you died, but how much spirit power and health you refill depends on how many evil spirits you shoot. It makes the game feel significantly easier, and the pressures of dying are pretty much non-existent. A large part of me thinks it's a bit too easy, and a part of the reason why the gunplay feels more relaxed than it should. I guess maybe a good game for Junior's very first FPS. Or maybe not. There's other minor gameplay inclusions, like piloting a small battleship to maneuver certain levels, which was a nice break from the normal grounded shooting. I do like that you get to have a tether grab to basically fling enemies to their death. A very simple first-person gameplay that I wouldn't even consider stressful, and very head-empty shooty, thanks to Tommy's quote-unquote immortality. Again, I did think this was a fun, relaxed aspect, thanks to the lack of pressure, and just letting me mindlessly shoot a bunch of weapons and solve a few simple puzzles, but it also doesn't exactly push the boundaries of its creative components to make it better than it should. A fun gameplay package in the end, but just missing a few inclusions to have made it more amazing.
You will have need of me this night.
Sure, whatever.
If Prey looks a bit familiar, some of you eagle-eye viewers may notice that it's using the id Tech 4 engine, the same one that's used in Doom 3. But instead of the mostly dark presentation that Doom emphasized to show how impressive its lighting was at the time, it's a lot brighter, metallic, and more meaty in Prey. But there's still a bit of Doom 3 in there.
Man, so dark in here. I'm doomed.
While the engine itself is quite outdated considering the graphical standards of today's games, I find Prey to still look impressively detailed. If there's one thing it wears really well on its sleeve, it's the way the world feels alive through its aesthetics. The first time you enter the game, it's really proud of the fact that you can interact with a lot of things in the bathroom. Not that you really interact with anything else other than the panels on the spaceship, but they really tried to make bathroom immersion look next gen back in 2006. Even going to the bar and playing with either the jukebox or the arcade machines. But the star of the game's aesthetics is the time spent on the sphere, because man, did they really make the bioorganic sci-fi alien vibe come alive. Everything from the gross organic entities that inhabit the walls and surfaces, as Claptrap puts it, the wall sphincters, to the variety in enemy models that exist, alien sci-fi is exactly what you're getting. I think the two biggest standouts that still make an impression on me today have to be the guns and certain assets for the environment. While the weapons function like a basic 90s shooter arsenal, their biometal amalgamative nature makes them one of the most uniquely looking arsenals I've ever seen in a video game. The Hunter rifle has these heated barrels attached to the main shaft, but carried by these organic moving wings at the bottom. Even the scope sort of elongates to meet your eye when you aim down the sights. The acid sprayer literally looks like a walking hazard with the acid itself dripping down the side of the gun. And the most brutal one of all are the crawler grenades, in which you use by ripping their legs off.
They ripped up the whole fucking bar!
Even more brutal is that they can double as landmines when you rip off one of their legs. Gross as hell, but amazing in a way that gives it such a unique aesthetic. And with the environment, there's a lot of really cool pieces when combined for their puzzle sections that make for a pretty strong impression visually. Things like the portals, the anti-grav walkways, and some environmental flair make for really mind-bending visuals. It sucks that this was only ever used once, but the part where you portal onto a tiny asteroid inside a glass case, only to see a hunter alien looking like the size of the universe, was and still kinda is a pretty cool visual trick. I'd also say the lack of cutscenes contributes greatly to its immersion, and always viewing the game through the eyes of Tommy emphasizes the whole first-person experience. On the audio side of things, The foley and sound effects that make the world feel alive is superb. To put it simply, the audio design, with making you feel like you're trapped in a metal-encased alien environment surrounded by grotesque monsters armed with a bunch of weapons and/or teeth, is exactly what the sound team has managed to convey. The musical side of things was pretty okay for the most part. The game provides its crescendos with amplifying the mood or action when needed, and the pieces are very epic and grand in their performance. They sound amazing, but they only appear for certain set pieces, which only occurs roughly 30% of the time.
Oh shit, there's more of those huge things! Where in the hell am I?
Usually, it's just silence and atmosphere for most of the game. There's also the inclusion of third-party tracks from bands like Blue Oyster Cult or the Edgar Winter Group that plays from the jukebox, but they're never used again for thematic purposes. The voice acting was just appropriate. Nothing inherently bad about it since it fits the scope of the game being an action movie thrill ride, but nothing that will move you emotionally either.
Jen loves you, you know.
She has a hell of a way of showing it.
She is Cherokee. She is bound to this land. Asking her to leave is asking her to give up a part of her soul.
But doesn't she want something better than this? I just want to find my girlfriend and get home.
Then perhaps there is a way we can help each other. We have been devising a plan to finally escape from this place.
Although it's cool that Michael Greyeyes and Crystal Lightning are First Nation actors playing Tommy and Jen. Also, I do like the radio cameos by Art Bell.
Good evening from the high desert. This is Art Bell. Well, it's been one hell of a night, folks, and still no official word tonight.
So while the id Tech 4 engine is already feeling its age, I can't help but appreciate how unique its sci-fi alien amalgamate of nature was achieved in Prey, where I would argue its art direction and presentation, with making Tommy trapped in an oppressive alien spaceship while shooting his way out, holds up really well.
So much power! I can do anything!
Despite the overall simplicity in the gameplay, Prey is a solid action FPS that I was happy to go back to again. Part of it comes down to feel, and while it's not trying to tease your brain with complicated gunplay or hard-to-think puzzles, it does lean into making you feel its sci-fi vibe, being surrounded by a bunch of aliens trying to probe you for some protein, while you use your hardened trigger finger and supernatural Cherokee powers to beat the crap out of them. But does it hold up? I'd say it's still worth checking out as a fun sci-fi FPS romp that manages to have its own unique identity. Old and a bit cliche, yes, but there's a very imaginative sense of fun with running around on a giant human abducting spaceship trying to save your girlfriend while experiencing all the weird technological and grotesque aliens you're surrounded by. Also the supernatural. Again, not the most difficult or challenging for those who want something demanding, and you'll be left wanting if you're looking for something unique or groundbreaking, but a simple shooter with a flair for the visual still makes its short campaign a fun ride for today. Just good luck to those trying to find a copy nowadays if you don't already have one. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. But for now, I'll see you all next time.